Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again with another tier list, and it's time for us to get back into a re-evaluation of the 5-star limited weapons, as well as some good 4-stars. And so the categories that we're going to be going by over here are going to be must pulls, essentially weapons that every single person should reliably have on their account. If they can spend the astrite for it, they're going to get a ton of value out of these. Then there's going to be strong and specific based off of the fact that a signature might be really good for its intended user, but not that great on others, but it's an amazing power increase. Then there's going to be a pull if you like the unit, and that's going to be really based off the fact that a signature might not be as strong as others, but if you really do like the unit, it's a great value and a great pick and will make the unit stronger, but maybe not to the same degree. And they might have some good weapon options as well. Think about like an Emerald of Genesis and a Changli or a Camellia, something like that. Then there's going to be low priority, kind of just stuff that's like a really good nice to have, but should only really be for like completionists and those that have a lot of money to spend. And then waste of astrite is just going to be down here. It's going to be like a signature, a limited weapon, maybe even a standard 5-star. That's just not that great. We'll be ranking the standard weapons as well, but we'll be doing those closer to the end of the 5-star section. I also have pretty much every limited weapon in the game and should be able to make a relatively accurate judgment on it, aside from G-Jaw signature as well as Shorekeepers, but I do know enough about them to be able to make a pretty accurate take. So with that in mind, let's just get right on into it, going by release order once again, and start off with Verdant Summit, Jiyan's Sig. And I gotta say over here, it's gonna be in the strong and specific, or in the pull if you like the unit category. But with the upcoming release of Augusta, who is going to be a heavy attack damage dealer, I do think that this one's probably going to be closer and strong and specific. And the reason for that is quite simple. This weapon is one of the only heavy attack buffing weapons in the game. And the thing is, it's actually pretty widely usable. It does seem like it's going to be pretty good. And the way that it works is it gives a pretty high base damage, a nice crit damage main stat, and then a really good attribute damage bonus. One thing that I'm going to weight a little bit higher when it comes to weapons is whether or not they have this attribute damage bonus versus something like a, well, let's just look over here using Lupa's as comparison, a 12% attack bonus. Typically how it works out is that attribute damage bonuses are actually a little bit stronger than attack, because it's way easier to get attack subs than it is to get attribute damage subs, because, well, you only get one type of damage when you roll them on echoes. And so actually having a stat like this on the weapon is a nice little benefit over here. And when it comes to activating this weapon, it's one of the easiest ones to activate in the game. Use an intro skill or liberation, you gain one of 2 stacks, and then each stack gives 24% heavy attack damage bonus. And the thing is, Augusta has a liberation, and Augusta is going to use an intro skill, and Augusta is also going to deal heavy attack damage. And so while this weapon is amazing on Jiyan, and again, it's one of the only really good options that he has because the standard one is kind of dog shit on him, it's really strong on him, it is specific, but it is getting bumped up a little bit because Augusta is also going to be able to use this thing too. And so this is more so like a value check because Jiyan's not on banner. He hasn't been on banner for quite a while, not actually since version 2.3. We don't know when he's running again. It has to be at 2.7 minimum. But if you already do have it, you might want to heavily consider whether or not you're pulling for Augusta's signature. And you're going to want to test her out using this bad boy first. And yeah, it's just a solid weapon. Easily activatable conditions, not too specific at all, and seems just like a good general use case thing for 2 of, you know, the Claymore, or sorry, Broadblade DPSs that are going to be in the game. So yeah, you could potentially make a use case for it down here, but once again, because of Augusta, it's getting bumped up. All right, now we got our next weapon. We've got Stringmaster. It's a must pull. And it's quite simple why this thing is a must pull. Because Stringmaster is, without a doubt, the best general use case weapon in the game. If it's not a best in slot on your unit, it's a close second. And you can say this for, naturally, Yinlin, but you can also say for pretty much every other Rectifier user that happens to be on the roster. The only limited 5-star user that doesn't like Stringmaster is Confession Mode Phoebe, where Stringmaster's great damage stats do absolutely nothing for her. But when Phoebe's in DPS mode, or you're using it on any other Rectifier user, it's going to be the second best in slot. And with this thing giving a whopping 36% critical rate alongside that attribute damage bonus, and then a pretty decently easy to stack attack bonus whenever you deal resonant skill damage, well, this thing is just inherently very, very, very good to have on your account. And it still is the most valuable thing that's come out of Yinlin's release, because this character herself is just not particularly very good. Yeah, she's aged very badly, but her weapon has aged extraordinarily well. And yeah, that's just going to be the #1 recommendation that I think any account can actually make, is securing one of these as soon as possible. And I do think this is actually available on the beginner weapon banner as well. Though I do think you're able to pull a character and you're able to pull a weapon from those intro beginner banners that are available. And so most people typically actually go with a combo of like a Shorekeeper on the limited 5-star and then a Stringmaster on the actual weapon. And the reasoning for that is, I think, pretty solid. So yeah, that's going to be Stringmaster. Now it's time for us to move on a little bit forward and look at the next release that has come out after Stringmaster, and that's going to be Age of Harvest. I think that Age of Harvest goes into the strong and specific category. And the reason for that is, once again, pretty damn simple. It's because Jinhsi's signature gives a nice blend of stats, and honestly, resonant skill damage is way more accessible than heavy attack damage, because most characters in the game do have their own resonant skill that's like a unique one that they can cast, and it ends up dealing, most of the time, some type of resonant skill damage. The reason why it's actually up here is because every Broadblade user in the game, as far as I'm concerned, has some type of resonant skill scaling. And while it isn't going to be the best in slot on these units, characters like Jiyan can use this. Characters like Lupa can use this and gain some damage bonuses out of the entire thing. And with it naturally being the best in slot with Jinhsi, and then also having a really easy to stack up effect where you use an intro skill and then just cast a resonant skill, I mean, what can we really say here? It's another option. You can put it on your Jiyan, you can put it on your Lupa, put it on your Calcharo too, and you'll be able to get a decent amount of mileage out of it. It is, with these two, are without a doubt in 2.6 going to be very, very, very solid choices. And the thing is, I'm debating whether or not it should go above Jiyan's in terms of overall value, but if it scales as well with Augusta as I think it might, then I do think that this being a top option for 2 DPS characters does outweigh Jinhsi's weapon being like a good all-rounder for all of the characters. I'd rather have this weapon where it has 2 close to best in slot wielders versus this weapon where it's like a good general pick, but not really as good on everybody else. So that's kind of like where it's coming from. Now, let's go ahead and move on to our next weapon, and this one is going to be Blazing Brilliance. And I guess this is currently my take on Blazing Brilliance. It's a very unique weapon that I think is valuable right now in the current stage of the game, but should actually drop at some point in the future. I know the must-pull category is kind of unique, but this weapon is actually kind of like a best in slot for a lot of units. And it's really, really confusing how to really rank it. Let me just talk a little bit about what's going through my head. So Blazing Brilliance is one of the most unique weapons in the game because it's currently the only sword in the game that provides a crit damage main stat. It's the only crit damage sword in the game. And the thing is that it gives that flat 12% attack bonus, but then also gives a really, really high stacking resonant skill damage bonus. And the thing is that this is a weapon that's incredibly good on units like, let's just say, a Spectral Rover. On actually, it's Sanhua's best damage weapon. It's like Yang Yang's best damage weapon. It's like the best damage choice for a ton of users in the game. But the thing is that it will quickly lose its spot and its kind of like unique bonus of being the only crit damage weapon when another one actually gets released. And the also unfortunate part is that even on Changli herself, this weapon isn't necessarily even like that good, because you can always just use Emerald of Genesis and have like DPS and have like performance, right? Because Emerald of Genesis has such great stats and like a great effect anyways, you kind of don't lose that much from not pulling Changli's weapon on her. The real victim of not pulling Changli's weapon is all of the other units, like your Spectral Rover, Havoc Rover, all the other sword users, the Dan Jins, that aren't able to benefit from using this. And so, yeah, it's kind of like a tricky way to rate it. If you're pulling this for Changli, I think it falls into the pull if you really like the unit. Because Changli is going to operate just fine on an Emerald of Genesis, and you're never going to have any issues with her on EOG, and then her damage is going to go up by like 10-15% if you do pull it. But if you're thinking about the overall value and like the way that can help bolster your account, this is one of the most widely usable signatures in the game on other characters. And so, ironically enough, I think I'll just put it kind of like here for now, maybe at the top of strong and specific, because it's not that strong on Changli, but it's strong on almost every other sword user in the game. So it is in a very unique spot, but expect a reevaluation of it and probably a lowering of its ranking as time goes on and more of those crit damage swords are actually released. That's gonna be that. Now, let's move on a little bit forward and get on into the first character version 1.2. We're gonna have Jiyan with her weapon. Yeah, this thing is low priority, and I'm not gonna say it's a waste of asteroid. And the thing is, well, I've got to look up what the weapon effect actually is on the wiki, because I don't actually have it in-game. But the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty simple how it works. So, what this weapon does is it increases your attack, so no attribute damage bonus, and then whenever you use a resonant skill, you gain a 12% basic attack damage buff, up to 36%, and then when you use an outro skill, that on-field basic attack damage bonus converts to an off-field one of 52%. This thing is kind of bad. And the reason why it's kind of bad is because Zhezhi can just use Stringmaster instead. And if Zhezhi isn't really using Stringmaster, she can actually use like a bunch of other 5 stars as well. And the thing is that this thing can be good on Zhezhi and it can be somewhat usable on other characters, like a Cantarella. It can also be usable on an Encore. But on those characters, Stringmaster is like kind of the same, or just better anyways. On Encore, Stringmaster is better than this. And on Cantarella, this is so comparable to Stringmaster, it's probably just better to have Stringmaster so you can use it on other units. And the end result is, when Zhezhi is a character that also regularly benefits a lot from using Stringmaster, then kind of like, what is the point of ever pulling your Sig? And if you ever end up pulling other Sigs like a Whisper of Sirens, well, because this thing gets a basic attack damage boost when using an Echo skill, Zhezhi can just use this as well. So it's like, she already has so many options available to her, but I'm not gonna write off this weapon as like completely useless, because it is undeniably Zhezhi's best in slot, and it is usable on other characters. It's just kind of like a worse version of Stringmaster in most respects, because it just has less users, and you get less value out of the pulls that you're putting in. That's really just what it is. So yeah, low priority, potentially waste of asteroid. We'll see. Maybe we'll do some reevaluation later. Next up, we got this bad boy. We got Zhang Liao's signature. And this is the thing. Zhang Liao's signature is going to be highly dependent on one interaction coming up in version 2.6. I'm going to put it in pull if you like the unit for now, because Zhang Liao does have like BP options, and of course the standard weapon isn't awful on him, but it's not great. The thing about Zhang Liao is that potentially it could be that is a Resonance Liberation damage dealer, because the new BP weapon that's coming out is designed around the new characters. This one boosts liberation damage, and is probably going to use this Echo over here in her main slot that gives arrow and liberation damage. And so the thing is, when all of this stuff is pointing towards liberation damage for then Zhang Liao's weapon that gives that exact stat might also be pretty damn usable on as well. And so the end result, guys, is, I think I'm going to change the category a little bit. We're not going to go with strong and specific anymore. We're going to go with just strong. And pull if you like the unit is going to be if it's a very specific weapon. And with that new categorization, this is how we're going to go. If this weapon is really good on because she's potentially a liberation damage dealer, it's going to go into strong. If it's only good on Zhang Liao and not that great on Yuno, but still has a use case on her, I think it's going to go into pull if you like the unit, because it's pretty simple over here. Zhang Liao with this thing is a pretty powerful unit. It also is a Resonance Liberation damage bonus that is not really usable on any other Gauntlet user in the game. And so it is kind of hyper-specific at this point in the game, not a lot of other users. And Zhang Liao also has, I'm just going to be honest here, the BP weapon is a pretty good alternative for him. Because Stonard, well, you can probably guess from what I'm saying, it literally just gives a Resonance Liberation damage bonus as well. So the end result is that Zhang Liao can still get really good performance with this. It still gives like crit rate and everything like that. You won't have as much attack, but you'll be able to clear all the content in the game with this. And so that's why it's going to go into pull if you like the unit, because you're taking the unit that can already clear with other options and then just giving them a little bit of extra juice because you want to see their damage numbers go higher. And if that's the case, go for it. But that's why it's going to be rated here. So that's that. Now we got the first entrant into my opinion for Waste of Astrite. Stellar Symphony. I think this thing is trash. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's because there's a 4-star weapon that exists in Wuthering Waves called Variation that makes this thing trash. So, to get some context, let's actually read what the weapon skill does. Increase your HP by 12%, restore 8 Concerto energy when using your Liberation, and then whenever you use a resonance skill that heals, increase your attack by 14% across your entire party. So, if we're just going to draw a bit of a comparison to the 4-star weapon that already exists in the game, essentially, if you have an R5 variation, this is the reality of the situation. An R5 variation is going to give double the Concerto energy. You'll go from 8 to 16 and have no other effects. And you'll have the same ER main stat. The thing is, Shorekeeper can already reach all of her ER thresholds without the big ER bonus or a signature, which gives like 20% more than variation. Plus, having 8 additional Concerto energy with all these refinements actually makes you rotate way faster using this compared to Shorekeeper signature. So essentially, what you miss out on is 12% HP, which is like, okay, that's like, all right. It's not the craziest thing ever. And then you miss out on 14% attack to the entire team. Guys, this is 1.5 attack substats. You're basically paying for 70 limited pulls, 12% more HP, which is about like 5% more healing and like 5% more damage, and 2 substat rolls on your DPS character when they're on Shorekeeper's team. You're also going to pay for a slower rotation too. You should only be considering pulling this weapon if you have somehow not managed to secure a single copy of Variation across the lifetime of your account, and you're just looking for some sort of way to speed up your rotation, because this is better than not having Variation. But if you have even a single copy of Variation, or God forbid you have 2, this is some of the worst use of limited pulls you can have in the fucking game. Paying 70 pulls for 5% more damage on your Shorekeeper's Liberation or your Shorekeeper's intro and 2 attack substats, sorry, 1.5 attack substats is crazy. And that only applies to the team, to the DPS that's currently on Shorekeeper's team. And so the other team that doesn't have Shorekeeper gains none of these bonuses. If you have no variations, that should be the only time you're thinking about pulling this. But if you have 1 or you have 2, this is some of the worst use of Astrite you have. And this is the thing. We got people in chat saying shit like, well, it looks good. Motherfucker, if we're at the point where you're like trying to justify your decision to purchase this by saying it looks good, Honor, we've lost the plot completely. Like, if those words are coming out of your fingertips or out of your mouth, you know you're coping. You're beyond coping at that point. Let's just be entirely honest with ourselves over here. Like, what are we even saying? Somebody from YouTube is saying, this is not Infinity Nikki. You're right, it's not. Yes, you don't get points for style in Wuthering Waves, unfortunately. So, looking better is not going to give you any combat advantages. Don't pull this thing unless you feel like wasting Astrite, because the incremental difference between having and not having this is like, what, 1 or 2 seconds? 1 to 5 seconds on your clear time? It's so pathetic, it's like not even worth investing in. Unless you really like Shorekeeper. But if that's the case, why are you even looking at a tier list? Just go pull all the fucking shit you want. But yeah, that's that for Shorekeeper. Now let's start moving on. Let's get on into our 1.4 limited weapon. Camellias. Red Spring, ladies and gentlemen, is kind of not that good. At least for your account. Because it's really good on Camellia, but you kind of can't use this weapon on other units. The only other unit that can sort of use this thing is like Brant. But if you're at the situation where like Brant is using this thing, then it's already kind of depressing. Because what this does is it gives you a 30% basic attack damage bonus that when you consume Concerto but stay on field, it goes up to 70%. But this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Camellia is the only character in the game that can consume Concerto, is a sword user, and then stays on field after consuming Concerto. This thing, literally, like, cannot be used. At least its secondary effect cannot be used on anybody else. And I guess I might amend the statements before. This is also usable on Cartethyia because of the basic attack damage boost, as well as Brant. But this is the thing. Any situation where you're using this, you can kind of already just use this thing. All of the users that we just talked about, including Havoc Rover, can just use this thing instead. And so while Red Spring is a nice to have, it doesn't like unlock any new builds. It doesn't unlock any new crazy stuff. It just takes the users of EOG and then makes them slightly better, which is like cool. But is it something that's worth spending 70 pulls on? Making users who are on EOG slightly better? And the answer is, I feel like not really. The reason why I have some of these other weapons a little bit higher up is because Blazing Brilliance unlocks new builds where you can stack a crit damage forecast with a crit damage weapon and get some interesting stuff that way. That's like kind of neat. Jinhsi's weapon is like a crit rate broadblade when there isn't a standard one, right? It's like all of these things kind of offer something new to the table, either being like a super best in slot or anything like that. What Red Spring does is it basically mainly exists to just supercharge Camellia. It is one of the strongest signatures on the game, but just on the individual wielder. And so that's kind of like the thing, right? That's why it's in pull if you like the unit, because Camellia is really, really, really good with it, but Camellia kind of already has a lot of existing options, but she's really good with it. Better than Zhang Liao actually is with his signature. This one gives more bonuses. But yeah, that's where this weapon is going to go. All right, so moving on from here, we just covered Camellia's weapon. Now it's time for us to get on into 2.0. And this is kind of the situation when it comes to this. Carlotta's signature is going into Strong. And it's going into Strong kind of out of necessity. The reason for that is kind of simple. Carlotta's signature is actually the only one in the game that's actually geared for a DPS pistol user. Every other weapon is actually geared towards a support or a sub-DPS type of pistol user. For example, Static Mist has great main stats, right? Has great crit rate, all of that, but it gives a buffing effect as the weapon skill. Then you got Woodland Aria. That's a sub-DPS weapon. The Last Dance is actually one of the only weapons in this class that actually boosts a damage type in its effect. It also gives the attack bonus. And so because of that, this is a best in slot on basically every pistol DPS in the game. Obviously Carlotta, it's a best in slot on Alto, and then it's a best in slot on Chisha. And that's kind of like how it is. Mortefi is kind of like the only exception where you want to use Static Mist on him because he buffs other characters. But aside from that, the Last Dance is kind of like the way to go. Oh, Last Dance also sucks on Ciaccona because she does no resident skill damage, but that's just like a different thing. Otherwise, yeah, you kind of want to use this on everybody. But the thing is that I think we're kind of at the point where this one's going to go at the bottom of Strong because there's just not that many pistol users in the game. And they're all 4-star units, aside from Ciaccona, which this thing doesn't work on. And so while it does kind of fulfill a similar role to a lot of the other weapons that we're seeing on here, it doesn't do them as well because it's not like we're doing this for particularly high value characters. And so that's why it's going to go at the bottom of here. It could theoretically go at the top of here as well, but I'm just going to put it down here. Galbrena is also going to be a pistol user that comes out, and so her sig might feel way more general use case too. But we'll do a bit of a reevaluation once the 2.0 arc and all those characters are released. Hell, this might work on Galbrena, who knows? But, I mean, based off of previous news that we've seen, probably not likely. Galbrena's probably going to do heavy attack damage. All right, but yeah, that is going to be Carlotta. That's going to be the Last Dance. That's going to be the evaluation over there. Yes, it's really good on Carlotta. It's amazing, in fact. But Carlotta can also use Static Mist, but it is more of a sub-DPS weapon. And this is a much bigger jump. Static Mist to the Last Dance is a greater jump than EOG to Red Spring. using Camellia as an example over here. All right, now let's move on and let's start taking a look at Luminous Hymn. I think that Luminous Hymn kind of goes into pull if you like the unit, but then also in low priority. And the reason for this is, like, kind of simple. This weapon is basically like, if you use it on Phoebe, it's great, but then it kind of just is actually dog ass on everybody else. So basically, this thing gives you a nice stacking basic attack and heavy attack effect if the character that you're attacking has Spectro Frazzle on them. And if they don't have Spectro Frazzle on them, it also has a second effect. Casting an outro skill actually amplifies Spectro Frazzle damage on the target by 30%. Basically, this is like a weapon that's either tailored around Phoebe as a main DPS, or it's tailored around Phoebe as a sub-DPS support for Zani. And the thing is that you pull this weapon if you really like Zani, or you pull this weapon if you really like main DPS Phoebe. And if you don't like either of those, do not touch this fucking thing. Because it is basically just like a shitty version of Stringmaster on everybody that's not Phoebe. It's like a Stringmaster with no weapon effect. Just a raw stat stick. But the stats alone aren't that bad. In reality, though, you never actually need this thing. You never need it for a Zani team to be good. You never need it for a Phoebe to be good, because you can just use Stringmaster as a main DPS. It is literally, like, in my opinion, one of the lower value weapons in the game after, like, evaluation and stuff. And the reason for that is quite simple. This effect is basically very, very similar to Stringmaster. And then this damaging effect over here that amplifies damage, 30% damage amp sounds like a lot, right? It sounds like a lot. It sounds really good. Then you look at Phoebe's outro skill, and you realize, wait, Phoebe's outro skill gives 100% damage amp to Spectrofrazzle damage. And so basically, my 30% coming from the weapon doesn't really mean that much when I'm already getting 100% from the character herself. And so I'm basically increasing the effectiveness of my outro skill by 30% for 70 pulls. Because guess what, guys? Phoebe doesn't do damage, so when she's in confession mode, these stats don't matter at all. You're basically using this weapon just for the outro ability. Otherwise, you could use any other weapon and have almost no difference in performance. And this effect just makes your outro skill, the amp part, 30% more effective. That's not that much for 70 limited pulls. I'm going to be honest here. That's not actually that great. That's not actually that good. It's kind of a bad pull. But if you do want your Zani team to be great, you do want your main DPS Phoebe team to be as strong as possible, or you want Phoebe to be like, or you're too lazy to switch weapons when you're going from main DPS Phoebe to confession mode Phoebe, sure. But it's just use Stringmaster, brother. Anyways, time to move on. I realized I skipped a character. Well, not that big of a deal because the weapon is dog shit. This thing is so fucking bad, it's unbelievable. I'm gonna be real with you. Tragicomedy is, without a doubt, one of the most unimpactful weapons I've ever used in the history of the game. Basically, this weapon is so bad, it almost doesn't make sense. The effect of this weapon is increased attack by 12%, and then every time you use a basic or intro skill, your heavy attack damage bonus increases by 48% for 3 seconds. This is the situation. There are 2 characters in this game that can use this weapon. Roccia and Zani. But if Zani is using this weapon, you're kind of in a situation where, why is Zani even using this weapon, and why'd you even have it in the first place? It's for Roccia and Zani only, but it's like you'd rather just pull Zani's weapon, and then Roccia would use Zani's weapon. Because this is the thing. When you go from a Roccia that doesn't have this weapon to a Roccia that has this weapon, the incremental increase in your rotational damage is so low. You're just like, okay, did I basically just spend 70 pulls to make my TOA clear 2 seconds faster? Because this is the thing, guys, Roccia doesn't do that much fucking damage. She just doesn't do that much damage. And so buffing her damage type by this much when she doesn't deal that much damage is like not really that great of a use of resources. And the thing is that, like, I'm telling you this as somebody with one of the best Rocias in gacha history. I might have the best built Roccia ever. Just look at her in-combat stats. I attack to trigger the weapon effect. These are her stats, brother. 72.8, 280, 95.2% heavy attack. And I'm telling you, this weapon sucks, brother. I'm telling you. the difference between using Zhang Liao's Sig, which has no heavy attack damage bonus, and then this one, I notice almost nothing in my clear times. And so, the better pick is to just pull Zani's weapon, which doesn't even have any interaction with heavy attack, but then has an 8% defense ignore, and just use that one instead. I'm gonna be real with you. Or you just put Zhang Liao's Sig on her. Because, good God, the amount of value that you get from this thing is almost non-existent. And there are some people saying, oh, well, you can use it on John Shin because she does heavy attacks. Brother, the heavy attack buff lasts 3 seconds. It's not long enough to get off John Shin's forte and benefit from it. It lasts 3 fucking seconds. I don't think people realize that. If this weapon skill actually lasted like 10 seconds or 5 seconds, it might have been usable, but it lasts for 3. It's like, it's already dog shit. They made it even somehow more dog shit by making the effect last only 3 seconds when there weren't any heavy attack gauntlet users in the first place for it to even buff. And so if there was a chance to buff them, this ruined it as well. It's so awful, it's unbelievable. It's way too short. It's like, if it was 10 seconds, I would bump it up to low priority. If it was longer than 3 seconds, I'd bump it up to here. But 3 seconds is such an abomination, I have to put it into Waste of Astrite. Do not pull this thing under any circumstance. Unless you S6 Roccia, but then you probably have bigger problems. All right, now, let's go. Let's get on into Brant. Brant's weapon is the most pull if you like the unit weapon I can think of in the game. Nothing fits the bill better for pull if you like the unit other than Brant's Sig. Because this is the thing. Brant's performance with his signature is so much more different than without his signature. Because this is basically how the unit works. His signature allows him to DPS and support at the same time. If you don't have his signature, you have to make the option of DPSing, like with an Emerald to Genesis, or you decide to support and heal and shield a bit more by using something like Overture. What this weapon does is it essentially blends both roles into his kit and allows him to do both at the same time. And when you are able to gain the basic attack damage bonus that he really needs, get a nice little crit rate boost as well of 8%, and then fuel his ER conversion passive with 77% ER, ladies and gentlemen, you're able to do quite a bit with this thing. And you can't really get good builds on him without having it due to the fact that ER can be a very hard stat to actually find and leverage and cap out. And then that 8% crit really helps bring him to some very reliable numbers at a full build. And the thing is, it's so good on him. That's actually why I decided to change some of the categories. Because this thing is kind of bad on every other unit in the game, but it's so good on Brant that it's a good pull. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that explanation works, because this thing is nuts. And if you have Brant, I'm not gonna lie, I think you should just pull the signature as well, because your life will actually be changed. But yeah, you're not going to use this on anybody else on the roster, so don't really even think about it. It does look cool though, because I guess the one thing that's kind of neat is, all right, you're probably going to think I'm lame, but like its visual effects do like persist even when you're using like a different character. So you can do like some kind of neat stuff where like Camellia actually has like the purple flame sword, or like any character really has like the purple flame sword. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool, but yeah, you're never going to use this in actual combat. So yeah, that's that one, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's move on. We just covered Brant. It's time for us to get on into the only character released in version 2.2, Cantarella Signature. And this is the thing. Cantarella Signature is kind of unique because it has like kind of like a two-parter effect where it's both like a very general use case weapon, sort of, with its basic attack damage buff, but then it really specializes and is good for Cantarella. I've had the time to play around with it, and this is kind of like my thought. I think you can put it on into a little bit above Zhezhi's because it really is a pull if you like the unit weapon. It's quite strong on Cantarella because it has a unique effect where you ignore 12% of the target's Havoc resistance, as well as gaining a 40% basic attack damage bonus. It is actually stacked. It is actually stacked in terms of the bonuses it provides, but unfortunately, its effect leaves when you leave the field. So it actually really reduces the use cases that it can have on other units on the roster. And the thing is, Stringmaster still performs well on Cantarella, but this weapon is a lot better than Stringmaster actually is on her because of all these additional bonuses it provides. And so the thing is, unfortunately, Cantarella isn't as like flexible as a character as Brant. She isn't really that widely usable in like more teams, and it does have a bit of a clunkier playstyle, but when she is with her signature, she does very well. And unfortunately, it doesn't work as well on other units. I'd probably rank it up here or even up here if it did have better use cases on other characters on the roster. But right now, it's kind of like somewhat usable on Phrolova, like a little bit usable on Phrolova. And then it's also usable on like a Zhezhi as well as an Encore, but not to as high of a degree as Stringmaster. But it does excel on Cantarella, so that's why we'll put it in pull if you like the unit. All right, time to move on to our next character, and that's going to be Zani. This weapon is also another pull if you like the unit situation, because Zani's signature does have some unique components to it. The main one being the fact that it buffs Spectral Frazzle damage dealt by 50%. It amplifies it, right? But when you stack this with certain other characters like a Phoebe, the damage bonuses actually aren't that relevant in general. And the main thing is that it has an 8% defense ignore if you're not dealing Spectral Frazzle damage. 8% defense ignore and 12% attack is actually a pretty good stat stick. It's actually one of the better general stat sticks in the game, and you can just pretend that this amplifies Spectral Frazzle damage effect isn't even here. 8% defense ignore plus 12% attack, it is at a baseline going to be somewhat decent. And it will actually outperform other options on the roster, assuming that A, you don't deal heavy attack damage or you don't deal Resonance Liberation damage, because that 8% defense ignore will theoretically apply to everything. And so that's going to be a bit of like a batting case for it. And of course, it's going to be really good on Zani. The thing is, unfortunately, a big part of this weapon's budget is in the Spectral Frazzle damage amplification. And if all you can use is the 8% defense ignore, then it's like, you know, it is a little bit suspect. And so no other character on the roster deals Spectral Frazzle damage. And so that's why I'm actually going to put it at the bottom of pull if you like the unit, because it does have a degree of flexibility, but it's not like as good or like it's not like exceptional in any units, much like how Red Spring, this thing, or like Zhang Liao's can actually be. And it doesn't turn Zani into like some absurd powerhouse either that like crazy outcompetes all of the other options that she has. So that's why this one is going to go in here. You pull it if you like Zani. If you don't really like Zani that much, yeah, I mean, this thing isn't really going to be calling your name. All right. Woodland Aria. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think this weapon is that good, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be entirely real. I feel like not having this, I feel like the difference between having this thing and not having this thing is almost non-existent in most of the clears that people are doing. This thing at a baseline just gives you like a 12% attack buff, which is like, you know, pretty normal. A 24% arrow damage bonus, which is, I'm not gonna lie, that just fucking sucks. 24% arrow damage bonus is not that great in terms of like overall damage. And then you do get this nice little team buff of reducing arrow resistance by 10%. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, the difference between having this and not having this is like, you almost don't notice it in your clears. And while this weapon does have really nice stats, a great 36% crit rate buff, brother, you can just use Static Mist on Ciaccona instead. Because while this attack buff might not work on Cartethyia, who's an HP scaler, you want to know what is going to work? This massive ER buff that the weapon has, which is 12% at rank 1, right? This massive ER buff is super important on Ciaccona because Ciaccona literally has a need for 130% ER to not grief your team's rotation. And believe me when I say this, it's more valuable to have the ER to cast her liberation than it is valuable to have 10% arrow resistance reduction to the entire team. And so that's even like a situation where like Static Mist actually feels kind of like better. And so this one is just, it's good if you get it, and it's pretty nice on like the full arrow team to like buff the team's damage more, but you don't need it to clear any content in the game. And then once you get it, it's not like it's like some game-changing revelation. And so that's why it's going under low priority, because you literally can just not get it and like not that much changes. You'll do like slightly less damage with the arrow teams. It's very similar to Phoebe's weapon. And I guess this is a dynamic that I find kind of cool, is that even on the teams where you would think that they're the most predatory, like Spectrofrazzle or Arrow Erosion, the weapons on the sub DPS are some of the least valuable in the game. They're some of the least valuable in the game, right? People are complaining about, oh, Zani needs Phoebe, oh, Cartethyia, Ciaccona, they need each other. I mean, you don't really need the weapons that are going into the equation. If we're being entirely real, they're kind of very, very low overall value, if that's how we're going to view it. Blood Pack's Pledge. I mean, it's like you're not even spending on it, so like I'll just put it in here. If you spent Astrite for your Blood Pack's Pledge, it's a waste of Astrite. I mean, I just won't rate it. Who cares? Anyways, it's basically a free 4-star weapon. Anyways, let's move on to our next release, and that is going to be Cartethyia's weapon. I mean, what can I really say, guys? It's at the bottom of pull if you like the character, because you're not using this on anybody else. You are not using this on any other unit in the game, because nobody else can actually have any benefit at all from it, because it's an HP scaling weapon. It gives you 8% defense ignore, which is nice, but then it requires you to have air erosion on your target to amplify your damage, which is like, yeah, that's kind of one of the most specific weapons in the game. And the great thing is that Cartethyia is entirely functional on other options, but she does level up a lot from having her signature, to the point where it's pretty comparable to Brant in terms of how good she is with it. The unfortunate thing, though, is that Brant has, like, slightly better options that can, like, actually, like, leverage more of his kit. She's kind of got, like, you know, arguably, she does have quite a bit of synergy with, like, Red Spring, and arguably, she can get a good bit of mileage out of, like, the crit stats that come out over here on some of these weapons as well. They balanced her weapon to a degree, though, by making it not actually have any crit stats in here, so you're kind of forced to use, like, a 4-4 build to, you know, make stuff work. I would say, man, it might go a little bit. I think I'll tie it for Brant. I think I'll tie it with Brant's for pull if you like the unit. And maybe it'll go above Brant's, because Brant actually has options like Overture and Emerald of Genesis he can use to, like, specialize in one way or the other. Cartethyia, unfortunately, does not have any, like, good 4-star HP options. She only has a 3-star one. And so if Cartethyia does get more like 4-star support later down the road, I would expect this to get bumped down a little bit, but I'll just put it up here right now because her options are not as competitive as Brant's. So yeah, that's where it'll go. All right, now for the next ranking, we've got Lupa's weapon. And this thing is kind of, I'm just gonna be honest with you, it's pretty unnecessary as well. This weapon basically gives you a attack crit damage mix. You get an attack boost of 12%, and then whenever you use an intro skill or liberation, increase your liberation damage by 24% for 6 seconds. And then if you deal heavy attack damage on top of that, you will extend it by up to 4 seconds. And then when you extend it, you can see how fucking long this thing is. And then when you extend it, you're gonna give a 24% fusion damage bonus to all resonators in the team. That's a lot of words. It basically buffs the team with 24% fusion damage and then gives her 24% liberation damage. You all know what my end conclusion of this weapon is? Very low priority. Also in line with all the other team buffing weapons. Guys, the difference between having this weapon equipped and not having it equipped, your team's damage barely changes. These three, right, belonging to the characters with, like, restrictive team lineups, pulling these weapons is, like, it doesn't actually give you that much of, like, a boost. It is one of the worst uses of pulls that you can actually make on your account, because pulling this is gonna, what, take your fusion team, make it clear, like, 4 seconds faster. It'll make you clear, like, 3 to 4 seconds faster. Same with this, same with this. And if that's worth 70 pulls, 3 to 4 seconds faster on one team, go for it. But I'm not going to go ahead and pretend to tell you that it was like valuable, or that it's going to be worth as much as pulls at any of these other areas. These are like unlocking builds. These are like making other units playable with crit stats. This shit is just like making one team do 2 to 3% more damage. 2 to 5% more damage on one team. I can't call that high value. And there are people, right, that would be like, wait, it boosts liberation damage. Isn't this going to be good on Calcharo? Brother, this is the equivalent of 2 substats on a Calcharo. That is what this 24% is. It's the equivalent of 2 substats, because Calcharo cannot use this 24% fusion damage bonus. And that's where, like, half the power budget of this weapon is. And so it's just like, no, you're not pulling this for a Calcharo, man. You're probably just using Lustrous Razor or anything else instead. It's not that good. It's just these 3 weapons, I have them all. I don't need them. Nobody needs them. Okay, there's just like other options on the roster. Like I said, Age of Harvest on Lupa, like a Verdant Summit on Lupa. Like it's just, or like Static Mist on the Ciaccona. It's just, you always have something that's like usable on more characters. You always have something that's usable on more characters, or is like a second best in slot. And that's just how it is. And now, for the last weapon, it is going to be Lethean Elegy, the signature for Phrolova. And so, this is the thing. Lethean Elegy is a unique weapon because a lot of people can get misled by some of the calculations that are coming out for this thing. That's because this weapon has the highest base attack out of all rectifiers in the game. However, that high base attack is offset by the fact that A, it also has the lowest crit rate out of all the rectifiers in the game. So with a higher base attack, right, you'll gain some nice little bonuses from all the other attack scaling that's going to be in a kit. And this is the thing. This is great. This is awesome. High base attack is awesome if you're having it on a main DPS. But on a sub DPS, which most rectifier users are, a high base attack, a low crit rate weapon is typically not going to be that good. And the reason for that is quite simple. The main DPS character is the one that collects the most buffs on the team. They're the one that's typically the recipient of like the most attack percentage buffs, all of that, right? But a sub DPS character, well, let's just be honest here. If I'm using a Zhezhi with, let's just say, an Empyrene Anthem, right? Empyrene Anthem's going to go ahead and give me a 20% attack buff to the active resonator. Is Zhezhi going to be the active resonator when Empyrene Anthem is active? No. So all of those percentage attack buffs, right, they're kind of getting wasted in a sense when I'm using a high base attack weapon like this on her, because that additional scaling is not really occurring. And so there might be some calcs that come out where they're trying to get into the difference between like Lethean Elegy and Stringmaster, and people are going to tell you Lethean Elegy is better. This is the reality of the situation. Those calcs are looking at situations that you'll never replicate in gameplay. Because in regular gameplay, if Zhezhi has Empyrene Anthem's buffs active for a long period of time, what the fuck are you doing? Because then you're just on-fielding with her, and you're, like, not using her as a sub-DPS, right? And for off-field characters, having this nice little boost of, like, all the critical stats in exchange for base damage typically works out better for their building and stuff like that. So the strengths of Lethean Elegy are, it's high base damage, it's, unfortunately, it's not really a strength, but it's lower crit rate, and then just some more, like, general stats that people can do, right? Like, ignoring 8% defense, as well as, well, a bit of a resonance skill bonus if a character does deal that. The unfortunate thing is that, well, this weapon, while it does have a unique blend of stats and it does have the 8% defense ignore, if you're not dealing echo skill damage and you're not dealing resonance skill damage, I don't really think it's doing that much for you, and you're sacrificing a lot of crit rate in your build. In most situations, Stringmaster is going to be a better overall choice, but ironically enough, this is going to be a pretty solid weapon choice for a character like, I know this is fucking weird, but it's like actually a solid weapon choice on Yinlin. Because it gives that resonance skill damage boost, and Yinlin does actually have an echo skill that deals a decent amount of damage. But in this situation, it's like, if you already have Stringmaster, you're never using this combination, because then Yinlin would just use the Stringmaster. So like, you can kind of see how this is like tricky rating this thing. My overall take on this is that it's mainly a Phrolova weapon. And while you can use it on other rectifier users, the sacrifices that you're making to use it on other rectifier users probably isn't the best thing ever. And you're probably just going to want to use Stringmaster instead, especially with how much easier it is to build. And so I think that I'll put this actually as the third in pull if you like the unit. Because without a doubt, I do think it's a fair bit better than Cantarella Sig. Because of that 8% defense ignore, it can actually be used on all characters, but it definitely isn't in the same category as a Stringmaster. I think that's for certain. So yeah, this is what the category is looking like right now. And as you can see, there seems to be a pretty good balance across the board. That's all of our limited weapon. Now let's start moving on a little bit further and just quickly rate some of our standard 5 stars. And we're just going to do a bit of a lightning round over here and then get into our 4 stars. Emerald of Genesis. It's a must pull. If you don't have a copy of this by now and you don't have it like as one of your first 5-star standard weapon pulls, you're griefing. It's just so good. It's just really, really, really good because it gives crit, it gives ER, and then it gives a general stacking attack buff that pretty much every single character in the game can get some sort of use case out of. And a lot of limited sword DPSs can just use this instead and have pretty top tier performance. This can be used on the Changli, this can be used on the Camellia. It's one of the reasons why so many of the sword options that are listed here are a bit lower. And once again, Changli's weapon is only in the strong part because it's the only crit damage weapon. It's just a great blend of stats. It's super flexible, and it's just something that every character or every person playing the game should be prioritizing. Next up, the pistol, Static Mist. That's also going to go in must pull, because this is, without a doubt, the most cracked sub-DPS weapon in the game. Honestly, if you read its weapon effect, it's low-key a signature weapon. Gives you ER, and then amplifies your outro skill and makes it even stronger by giving it an attack buff on top of using your outro. I think that this weapon is why Jiyan hasn't gotten a limited 5-star sub DPS yet, because Mortiphy with this is very similar to a limited 5-star in terms of his like potential in the game, because of how absolutely busted Static Mist actually is as a weapon. It is incredibly strong and should be, again, another top priority pick. I would dare say in some situations it's above EOG, but they're basically neck and neck. All right, now for everything else. Okay, that's probably too rude of a ranking. I think Lustrous Razor is just easily the worst standard weapon out of the bunch, and the reason for that is simple, and I'm just going to go into the menu over here to start making this. Not a lot of characters are actually able to use this Resonance Liberation damage bonus. The main ones are Lupa, Jinhsi, and then maybe 1 or 2 other units. The problem is that it has an attack main stat and doesn't have crit like the other options, and so it's really annoying to build around. And attack percentage main stats are just trash, and then the weapon skill doesn't work on most other Boblay users. It's like made for Calcharo, and then it's not even that good on him. Next up, we're gonna have Abyss Surges. This is quite easily the biggest piece of poo-poo I've ever seen. It might be worse than Lustrous Razor. This thing gives you, again, attack main stat, and then when you use a resonance skill, you increase your basic attack damage. Who's a gauntlet user that does basic attack damage? There's one. It's called Ling Yang. Fuck this thing. Anyways, then we got Cosmic Ripples. This thing's actually okay. It gives you ER, and then when you deal basic attack damage, you get more basic attack damage. And there's actually a fair amount of Rectifier basic attack damage dealers. The end result, even though it has an attack main stat, I actually think the Rectifier is the best, the Gauntlet's the worst, and the Broadblade's in the middle. That's my take. But the thing is, if you have Stringmaster, you're never going to pull this thing. And honestly, they're all kind of relatively bad. The only reason why I have the other standard weapons and why I'm grinding them is so that I can try them out for content. So I can talk about how, whether or not you're able to clear, kind of using some of the worst but best budget options in the game. And then this thing is it's just a good weapon, but it's free. And so you don't spend anything to get this. So it's good. Like, I guess I'll put it up here because it's free. So, you have to get it to progress the story. You can't, not get it. So it is a must, literally. All right, now let's talk about some of the 4-star weapons that are actually somewhat decent in this game. Okay, this is just going to be a bit of a fast random round. So first weapon up is, of course, going to be the fish weapon. This thing, if you're playing a main DPS Phoebe, is actually amazing. And for a lot of people that played during 2.1, a recommendation was you pull Phoebe, you get her weapon from the fish event, and then just use her with Spectral Rover, and you now have the best free-to-play team in gacha history. Yeah, because this weapon essentially gives you a nice little damage buff if you're attacking enemies that have, Spectro Frazzle. This thing gives you a nice little Spectro damage bonus when you attack enemies with Frazzle on them. And, that's entirely what Phoebe does. So, it's just a great free-to-play option that made for, budget players. I mean, it made her a really good pick. I mean, what can I really say? It was one of the most free-to-play friendly thing the devs have done. So great job on that. Another weapon that's actually really good is going to be... Where the fuck is the Somme Noir Anchor? Can't find it. Anyways, we'll use the Dull Blade in exchange for the Somme Noir Anchor. This thing, the Somme Noir Anchor basically is a 4-star weapon that actually gives incrementally increasing attack and then a crit rate boost when you reach the max number of stacks. And this thing actually works for any on-fielding sword character which actually can be a fair number of them, and it's pretty decent, right? It's pretty good, but in most cases, you will be using EOG instead, but I guess if you're in an odd situation where you don't have EOG and you have this, you'll use this, but I mean, you'll just use EOG instead. I'm not gonna lie, if this was like a Broadblade, if this was any other weapon type, it would have been so much better. But it's not really that good because EOG already exists. So that's kind of like a confused existence for this weapon. Now let's move on to just basically other callouts over here. The main one that I have to make is, of course, going to be... Where the fuck is it? Just pull Variation. Just get a copy of Variation. Also get a copy of Discord, also get a copy of Marcato, and also make sure to get a copy of Where's Overture. Get a copy of that, and Cadenza. Basically, what I'm saying is get a copy of the Concerto series of weapons, where when a Resonant skill is cast, restore X amount of Concerto energy. You want as many copies of this as possible. You want on characters like maybe even like a Sanhua, you want to make sure you got that copy of Overture ready to go. You want all of these for all of the different weapon types. And if you ever get any Ceaseless Aria weapon skill, do not throw it away. Don't even refine it yet. Make sure you have 1 or 2 copies of every single one. Because the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, these shorten your rotation time. These basically make it so that you can, on your buffing sub-DPS teammates, give buffs to your main DPS faster. And when you have these ready to go, you can essentially sacrifice the damage output of a character to make the other character get their buffs faster. And if you're, you know, playing characters that don't really deal that much damage in the first place, like a Sanhua or a Shorekeeper or a Verena, don't really do damage, putting these weapons and stuff on them aren't a huge loss. However, there are characters that are sub-DPSs that actually deal damage, where maybe you don't want to do that. So just something to keep in mind. It's really more of like a future team building tip to, you know, consider saving all these 4 stars, but I think it's a good one. Call of the Abyss is another option if you don't have a variation, but, you know, I don't want to dig too much into that. But yeah, that's going to be what the list looks like right now, ladies and gentlemen, going all the way from must pull to strong to pull if you like the unit to low priority to waste asteroids to good 4-star weapons. And I think that this, incorporating the standard weapons, it's a pretty fair breakdown of everything that we have coming up. Naturally, there's a bit of speculation just based off of the things that we've seen from like Echo descriptions, all of that, Whimpering Waste token buffs, and there's movement that can happen in a bunch of different directions. Like if Xiangli Yao Sig is really good on Yuno, then this probably gets bumped up to like here, stuff like that that we can do. But we'll make sure to reevaluate this at a later point, likely after the release of Chuyan, after the release of Galbrena, after the release of Chisha, so we can actually go ahead and, you know, see whether some of these bets have played out. But I think that knowing we have some of the most anticipated releases on the horizon coming out in the near future, it's a good time to reevaluate, right, what all these different weapons are doing. And, you know, potentially make some plans depending on who you're looking to gear. So yeah, let me know what you all think. Was this helpful? Was this annoying? Or was this something that at the end of the day, right, you got a bit of value from? We'll be waiting to see the value of the new BP weapons that are actually coming out. Because one thing that's a little bit unfortunate about the Hunter's Growl series, half of these weapons don't have any users on the roster currently. And they're just straight up worse than all the other options on the existing roster. It's clearly designed for some of the new releases. So that's why we won't be evaluating them just yet. So yeah, that'll be that. Let me know what you all think. Peace.